In the constant noise of modern life, where our minds chase distractions like shadows on a wall, we often forget that we are not meant to be led by our thoughts. We are meant to guide them, but rarely do we pause long enough to even ask ourselves, what would happen if we slowed down, took a step back, and truly listened? Not to the world, but to ourselves. This is the journey we are about to take, a quiet rebellion against the chaos, a sacred pilgrimage inward, carved from the ancient wisdom of Buddhist practices that have weathered centuries yet still remain as powerful as ever. These aren't just practices, they are keys. And if we hold them just right, they unlock more than calm. They unlock transformation. There is a stillness that exists beneath every anxious thought, every racing heartbeat. And tapping into it doesn't require grand ceremonies or impossible discipline. It only asks for presence. In the heart of Buddhist tradition, this presence is cultivated through mindfulness meditation, a practice that invites us to stop running, to simply sit, to observe without needing to change anything. It is both gentle and demanding. It's like holding a bird in your hands. You must be delicate but attentive. You don't grip, you don't push away, you just stay. And in that staying, something begins to shift. You begin to notice the texture of your breath, the rhythm of your body, the fleeting nature of each thought. It's as if you've turned a light on in a room that had always been dim. This practice doesn't try to fix you. It doesn't offer escape. Instead, it teaches you to be with yourself fully in every imperfect moment. And for many, that simple act has been life-changing. People who once drowned in stress have found themselves breathing again. Those weighed down by grief have discovered a small, quiet space to carry their sorrow with dignity. Even those with no spiritual leaning have stumbled into a kind of healing they didn't know they needed. Because mindfulness isn't about religion. It's about being human. In the quiet room of a therapist's office, in the early hours before sunrise, in the chaos of traffic, this practice has found its place. People from all walks of life have sat with their breath and discovered it was enough. Enough to calm, enough to anchor, enough to remind them they were still here, still alive, still capable of peace. And as this tradition spread across continents, it transformed. Stripped of robes and ritual, it became a bridge, something anyone could walk across toward clarity, toward healing. But mindfulness is only the beginning. There is also the practice of focused attention, a deeper sharpening of the mind's edge. If mindfulness is the gentle opening of awareness, then focused attention is the still point, the narrowing of light into a laser. Here we choose one single thing to focus on, a sound, a breath, a word, and we return to it again and again, no matter how many times the mind strays. It is humbling, even frustrating, but it is also profound. Focused attention teaches discipline not through force, but through patience. The kind of patience that watches thoughts tumble in and doesn't chase after them. It's the mental equivalent of learning to walk a tightrope, not by erasing fear, but by returning again and again to balance. For many, this practice has improved not only their meditation, but their everyday lives. Students find themselves less distracted. Professionals begin to reclaim their ability to truly focus. Artists tap into a new depth. Because concentration is a kind of superpower in a world built on attention theft. And through this practice, we take that power back. But meditation isn't always still. Sometimes it moves. That's where walking meditation comes in, a practice as old as silence itself. In the quiet corridors of monasteries and along dirt paths carved by bare feet, practitioners have learned that each step can be sacred. Walking meditation is a rhythm, a return to the body. It's an invitation to stop rushing, to feel the lift and fall of each foot like a soft heartbeat against the earth. It's not about where you're going. In fact, the destination doesn't matter at all. What matters is the awareness, the way your foot rolls over stone or grass, the way your breath syncs with your pace. Suddenly, walking becomes more than movement. It becomes presence. And in that presence, the ordinary becomes holy. A walk to the mailbox becomes a pilgrimage. A stroll through the park becomes a ceremony. And in a world that teaches us to run, to hustle, to never stop moving, walking meditation becomes a quiet act of rebellion. But stillness always returns. And for that, there is Zazen. It's a practice stripped to the bone. Just you, a cushion, and the raw truth of your mind. No mantra, no visualization, no goal. Just sitting, just being. It sounds simple, but in practice, Zazen can feel like climbing a mountain with no peak. Thoughts rise and fall like waves. Discomfort pulls at your knees. Silence becomes deafening. But in that silence, something shifts. Zazen teaches you to stop fighting, to stop needing to understand or fix. It's not about getting somewhere. It's about being nowhere, with full attention. And for many, this becomes the most honest space they ever inhabit, a space where masks drop, where illusions dissolve, where the self begins to melt into something quieter, more spacious. Practitioners often speak of moments during Zazen where time seems to disappear, where the boundary between breath and body vanishes. These are not fantasies. They are glimpses of a peace that cannot be bought or taught, only experienced. And from this stillness grows a deeper wisdom, the understanding of impermanence. Everything changes, everything ends, the seasons turn, the people we love grow older. Even the pain we carry begins to soften if we allow it. Impermanence is not a threat, it's a promise that nothing stays stuck forever. That joy, though fleeting, always returns. That sorrow, though deep, will not last forever. Accepting impermanence is perhaps one of the most difficult teachings because it means letting go. Letting go of control, of certainty, of the illusion of forever. But in that letting go, there is freedom. The kind of freedom that comes when you stop gripping so tightly to what was or what might be. You begin to live, truly live, not in the future or the past, but right here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this fleeting, perfect moment. And in this moment, you may also discover gratitude. Not the kind that comes with grand gestures or Instagram posts, but the quiet kind. The kind that wakes up in the morning and says thank you. The kind that notices the way sunlight warms the skin, or how laughter can soften even the hardest day. Gratitude isn't something you wait to feel, it's something you practice. It's the act of turning your attention toward the good, even when the world feels heavy. And in that practice, life changes, not because your circumstances do, but because your perception shifts. You start to see what was always there: beauty in the mundane, magic in the everyday, softness in a world that often feels sharp. Gratitude opens the heart, softens the mind, and makes room for peace to enter. And so, we begin this journey through stillness, movement, silence, and breath, through watching, through feeling, through letting go. The teachings are not complex, but they are powerful. And if you let them, they will transform you from the inside out. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to be perfect. You only have to begin. Somewhere in the middle of all our striving, we forget that peace isn't earned through perfection. It's discovered in our willingness to sit with imperfection and still remain kind. That's the part no one teaches us growing up. We're told how to achieve, how to succeed, how to keep going, but no one quite explains how to rest, how to sit with ourselves, how to befriend the quiet. And maybe that's why stillness feels so foreign at first, because it confronts us with everything we've avoided by staying busy. But the stillness, if you stay with it long enough, begins to speak, not in words, but in a kind of inner unfolding. And what it reveals is this: your presence as it is enough. Not when you've healed, not when you've done more, not when you've earned rest, but now. That's what many who practice mindfulness slowly come to understand. It's not a fast road, and it's rarely dramatic. But there's a steady transformation that begins to ripple through your life the more you commit to it. Your reactions become gentler. Your triggers lose some of their edge. You start catching your thoughts before they pull you under. You stop spiraling quite so far. You begin to pause. And in that pause, you make choices that align with your peace instead of your panic. You start noticing your patterns, not to shame yourself, but to free yourself. You notice how quickly you say yes when you mean no. How often you stay silent when your truth is asking to be voiced. You see how many of your decisions were made from fear. Fear of rejection, of being misunderstood, of losing something. And instead of trying to push those realizations away, you welcome them in like old friends returning home. Because now you have the capacity to hold them, not as judgments, but as guideposts. With every moment of presence, you build trust in yourself. Not the performative kind of trust, but the quiet confidence that grows when you keep showing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable. When you stay instead of escape. When you listen instead of avoid. When you breathe through instead of react from. And yes, there are moments when it's hard. Moments when the mind feels louder than ever. When your thoughts seem relentless. But that's part of the path too, because mindfulness isn't about silencing the mind. It's about changing your relationship to it. You stop seeing every thought as truth. You stop letting every emotion become a story. You begin to witness without attachment. You begin to allow without resistance. Over time, you find that what used to overwhelm you no longer holds the same power. You're not unaffected. You're just more rooted, more balanced. And even when life pulls you off center, you know how to return, not by force, not by escaping, but by presence. And as you return again and again, you start to live from a different place, not from reaction, but from clarity, not from fear, but from intention. You become less interested in controlling life and more invested in experiencing it. You let go of the need to have it all figured out. You stop chasing certainty and begin to cultivate trust in the process, in the moment, in yourself. One of the most powerful shifts comes when you start choosing peace, even when you don't feel peaceful. When you decide to pause, even when your emotions beg for reaction. When you choose silence, not as a withdrawal, but as a deeper listening. You begin to realize that peace isn't passive, it's active. It's a commitment, a devotion to your own well-being, a fierce kind of softness. And as your peace deepens, so does your compassion. Because you no longer hold yourself to impossible standards, you stop holding others to them too. You allow people to be human. You stop expecting perfection. You forgive more easily, not because it erases what happened, but because you no longer want to carry the weight of resentment. Forgiveness becomes a gift you give yourself. There's a softness that begins to touch everything you do. The way you speak, the way you walk, the way you hold space for others. You begin to understand that presence is one of the most healing forces we can offer. Not advice, not solutions, just the quiet, full presence of someone who is truly here. And people feel it. They feel the steadiness in your voice, the calm in your eyes, the safety in your energy. You become someone who doesn't need to fix everything to be of service. You simply become a mirror, a reminder that peace is possible, that healing is possible, that we can sit in the mess and still be whole. You start to feel joy again, Not the fleeting kind that depends on external circumstances, but the kind that rises unprompted, the kind that lives in the breath, in the wind, in the sound of your own footsteps. You laugh more, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped waiting for it to be. You've remembered that life is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be lived. And in this remembering, you come home to yourself. You no longer chase peace like a goal on a list. You live it in the way you eat, the way you listen, the way you rest, even the way you say no. Peace becomes a rhythm, a way of moving through the world that honors your truth, your energy, your soul. And it's not always clean, it's not always graceful. There are still days where you fall into old habits, where you forget, where the noise gets loud again. But now you don't stay lost. You find your way back faster. You know the path. You've walked it enough times that even when it's overgrown, your feet remember. And your breath, that sacred thread that's been with you through it all, it becomes your compass. In, outside in. Outside each breath, a reminder that you're alive, that you're healing, that you're enough. Not later. Now there comes a quiet shift inside when you begin to realize that your worth was never supposed to come from achievement. It was never tied to how much you do or how well you perform. That idea, that constant motion equals value, was something handed to you by a world obsessed with productivity. But when you slow down long enough to hear your breath, to feel your heartbeat, to return to the raw truth of your presence, you discover a deeper rhythm, one that says, you are enough because you exist. That's it. That's always been it. And that realization doesn't come all at once. It arrives in moments. The stillness after a long exhale, the tenderness of tears you finally let fall, the softness in your own voice when you tell yourself, I'm proud of you, even now. These are the sacred thresholds of healing, the places where you begin to rebuild your inner home, not from brick and mortar, but from trust and self-compassion. You begin to stop measuring progress the way you once did. It's no longer about ticking boxes or keeping up. It's about presence. Did you breathe through the hard moment instead of running from it? That's progress. Did you forgive yourself for slipping back into an old pattern? That's healing. Did you pause long enough to choose kindness over judgment? That's growth. And it's this subtle, consistent inner work that begins to create real change. You stop reacting with the same sharpness. You start responding with awareness. You notice the pause before you speak, the space that didn't exist before. You feel emotions rising, but now you don't drown in them. You hold them gently, like waves rolling against the shore. They come, and you stay. That staying, that willingness to remain when things get uncomfortable, that's where your power lives now. You don't need to be unshakable. You just need to be present. And presence means being with whatever arises, even the things you once tried to avoid at all costs. Grief, anger, shame. These used to scare you. Now you meet them like guests at your door. You let them in, offer them tea, ask what they've come to show you. Because you've learned something most people don't know, that emotions aren't threats, they're signals. And when you listen, really listen, they teach you what still needs your love. You begin to hold space for the broken parts of yourself without rushing to fix them. You don't tell your sadness to leave. You sit beside it. You don't force your fear into silence. You hold its hand and walk with it. This kind of tenderness, this radical acceptance of your own humanity, becomes the soil where your peace begins to bloom. And it blooms quietly. You may not even notice at first. You'll just feel a little lighter. You'll notice you're breathing deeper. You'll catch yourself smiling at small things, a bird outside your window, the warmth of your tea, the softness of your blanket. These aren't just niceties, they are signs, proof that your nervous system is beginning to trust the present moment again. Because for so long, your body lived in defense. You were always bracing, waiting for something to go wrong, preparing for disappointment, anticipating pain. But now, slowly, gently, you're teaching yourself to soften, to relax your shoulders, to unclench your jaw, to breathe fully. And that softness is not weakness, it's resilience. The kind that doesn't need to armor itself to feel safe. You begin to understand that safety isn't something you find outside of yourself. It's something you build within, through presence, through kindness, through consistency. You show up for yourself again and again, and eventually your inner world starts to believe you. This is what emotional regulation looks like. Not numbing, not suppressing, but staying rooted while the storm passes through. You don't stop the storm, you just stop giving it the power to destroy your peace. And sometimes that peace looks like silence, like stepping away from the noise, turning off the phone, closing the door, lighting a candle and doing absolutely nothing. At first, this might feel selfish, but the more you practice it, the more you realize it's sacred, it's necessary, because in that silence, you reconnect to your truth. The truth that you are not your thoughts. The truth that you are not your productivity. The truth that you are not broken. You are whole, right now. Even with the questions, even with the wounds, even with the days where everything feels heavy, you are still whole. You no longer seek constant reassurance. You start trusting your inner knowing. You no longer need others to validate your experience. You become your own witness, your own nurturer, your own safe space. And from this place of self-trust, your relationships begin to transform. You no longer abandon yourself to be accepted. You no longer shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You speak your truth not to convince, but to express. And if someone doesn't understand you, you don't spiral. You breathe. You grieve if you need to. You honor your feelings, but you don't betray yourself anymore. You learn that boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges. They're the way you honor your energy while still staying connected to others. You set them not from fear, but from love. Because you finally understand that you can love someone and still say no. That you can be compassionate and still protect your peace. And when you do, something incredible happens. You start to experience connection without self-erasure. You feel closeness without anxiety. You feel seen without needing to perform. This is what happens when you meet the world from a place of groundedness. When you've returned to yourself deeply enough that you can finally let others in without losing who you are. That perhaps is the most powerful transformation of all. There is something tender about realizing you no longer need to chase love, not because you've given up on it, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself to get it. That realization creeps in slowly, like sunlight through a curtain you didn't realize you left open. And when it touches your skin, it doesn't burn, it warms. You begin to see that all along, what you were aching for in others was simply a reflection of what you hadn't yet given to yourself. Attention, understanding, patience, forgiveness. And so you begin again. This time, not with self-improvement projects or endless fixing, but with presence. You sit with yourself not as a problem to be solved, but as a person worthy of care. You look in the mirror and don't search for flaws. You look for signs of softness, of survival, of stories etched into your skin and around your eyes that say, I've lived, I've felt, and I'm still here. That kind of self-recognition isn't vanity, it's medicine. Because for years you were taught to focus outward, to mold yourself into what others would accept. But now you're facing inward. You're listening for your own voice. You're making space for the quiet needs that never learned how to speak up. And the more you listen, the more you hear. At first, it's just a whisper, I'm tired, or I'm scared, or I need rest. But over time, it gets clearer. I deserve gentleness. I don't have to carry this anymore. I am allowed to feel safe. And that safety, it becomes sacred. You start protecting your peace like a flame in the wind, not by closing yourself off, but by staying close to what grounds you. You begin to make different choices. You leave the room when the energy isn't right. You say no even when your voice shakes. You prioritize stillness, not because life is slow, but because your nervous system deserves to breathe. And in those choices, your inner world starts to believe you. Your body begins to relax. Your breath deepens. Your mind softens. There's a shift in your rhythm. You begin to move through your days differently. You wake up and check in with your body before you check your phone. You drink water slowly, like it's a blessing. You light a candle not for show, but because watching the flame helps you return to now. You speak less, but with more meaning. You listen more, not because you're obligated, but because you're genuinely present. This presence changes everything. You begin to notice the little things, the warmth of your blanket, the way sunlight lands on your skin, the sound of wind through trees. These aren't background noises anymore. They're reminders that life is happening now. Not in your plans, not in your regrets, but in the inhale and exhale that you are taking in this very second. And through that awareness, something even deeper arises: acceptance. Not the kind that means you give up or that you settle for less, but the kind that says, this is what is, and I will meet it with grace. You stop resisting reality. You stop wishing things were different before you allow yourself to feel peace. Instead, you find peace inside the imperfection, inside the uncertainty, inside the places you once thought needed to be fixed before you could rest. And maybe that's the most radical thing of all, resting even when life feels unfinished. Because life will always feel unfinished. There will always be something undone, unanswered, unresolved. But now you know that doesn't mean you have to stay tense, stay busy, stay in overdrive. You are learning to rest in the middle, to breathe in the unknown, to let go of the need to solve everything before you feel okay. You are no longer waiting for permission to feel peace. You're creating it, not through control, but through surrender. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening your grip. It means allowing life to unfold without trying to bend it to your will. It means meeting this moment exactly as it is, with a heart open enough to receive whatever it holds. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Because when you stop trying to force your life into shapes it was never meant to hold, you begin to see what was always there. Space. Space to feel. Space to breathe. Space to change. Space to begin again. You start giving yourself the grace to be human, to be a work in progress, to not know all the answers. And instead of seeing that as failure, you begin to see it as freedom. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to carry it all alone. You're allowed to ask for help. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to take up space even when you're still learning how to love yourself. And the more you allow, the more you open. You stop bracing for the worst. You start expecting softness. You stop preparing for rejection. You start leaning into connection. You stop guarding your heart like it's a fortress. You begin to treat it like it's sacred, because it is, because you are. And in this state of being, rooted, open, aware, you begin to feel joy again. Real joy, not the kind you chase or perform, but the kind that rises unexpectedly, like laughter during silence, like awe in the face of something simple, like gratitude that comes out of nowhere and fills your chest so fully you have to close your eyes to hold it. This is the joy that lives underneath everything else. It doesn't ask for perfect circumstances, it only asks for presence. And you have that now, because you've practiced, because you've stayed, because you've chosen again and again to return to yourself with tenderness. And in returning, you've remembered something essential. That peace was never far. It was always waiting for you in the quiet, in the breath, in the now. There comes a time when you realize you've spent most of your life in anticipation, waiting for the next moment to fix this one, waiting for the weekend, the apology, the next chapter, the next version of yourself. And you begin to see how much of your joy you've delayed, how many of your breaths you've withheld, how long you've waited to feel like you finally arrived. It's not your fault. The world taught you that happiness lives in the next thing, but you're unlearning that now. You're learning that joy doesn't come from what's next. It comes from what's here. And what's here is often quiet, overlooked, fragile, a sip of warm tea, a smile from a stranger, the feeling of your own hand resting over your heart. These are not headlines. They are not life-changing in the way that movies portray, but they are life-giving. And if you're paying attention, they will nourish you in ways achievement never could. You start to see that the rush to arrive has been the very thing keeping you from peace. Every time you've said, "I'll be happy when," you've told yourself you're not enough yet, that this version of you is still lacking, still becoming, still unfinished. But what if you stop saying that? What if this version of you, the tired, the healing, the searching version, was already worthy of love? Not in some distant future, but now. That question doesn't come easy. It bumps into old wounds, into the stories you've carried since childhood, into the voices that told you you had to be perfect to be valuable. But even as it bumps, it stays. That question becomes a doorway. And when you step through it, you realize something quietly revolutionary. You don't have to wait to be okay. You can choose peace before things make sense. You can choose love even when you're afraid. You can choose softness in the middle of your becoming. And that choice changes you, not suddenly, not loudly, but deeply. It's the choice to sit with discomfort instead of rushing past it, to hold your own hand when grief rises, to speak kindly to yourself when your mind spirals. These are the choices that form the foundation of healing, not the dramatic transformations, the tiny acts of presence, the daily return to stillness. This is the path that those who seek true peace walk, not because it's easy, but because it's real. And somewhere along this path, you begin to redefine strength. It's no longer about how much you can carry. It's about how gently you can hold yourself. It's not about pushing through pain. It's about honoring it, listening to it, letting it soften in your presence. You begin to understand that the strongest people you know are the ones who allow themselves to feel. The ones who don't shut down when things get hard. The ones who cry without shame, rest without guilt, and speak truth without apology. They're strong because they're real, because they've stopped pretending, because they've learned that vulnerability is not the opposite of power. It is the doorway to it. And as your strength deepens, so does your patience. You stop rushing your process. You stop comparing your journey to others. You begin to trust the timing of your life. That's not an easy trust. It's one you have to build moment by moment, especially on the days when everything feels slow, when healing doesn't feel like progress, when peace feels far away. But you stay anyway. And that staying, that refusal to abandon yourself, is the truest form of devotion. You're beginning to live in alignment now, alignment with your values, your intuition, your body. And alignment doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means there's less friction between who you are and how you live. It means you say yes because you mean it, not because you're afraid to say no. It means you move in ways that honor your energy instead of betraying it. It means your choices reflect your truth. And truth, when you really live it, feels like freedom. Even if it's uncomfortable at first. Even if others don't understand. Because the more you honor your truth, the more you attract what aligns with it. You stop settling. You stop shrinking. You stop chasing things that drain you. And slowly, your life begins to feel like yours again. That reclamation doesn't happen overnight. It's built one boundary at a time, one breath, one honest conversation, one moment where you choose not to abandon yourself. And those moments, they add up. They weave a new story. One where you are no longer the one left behind. One where you are the one who stays, not just for others, but for yourself. And in that staying, you discover the kind of peace that isn't dependent on circumstances. The kind that doesn't break every time life gets hard. The kind that's rooted in something deeper than logic, something sacred. That peace lives in the way you greet yourself in the mirror, in the way you allow your mornings to be slow, in the way you don't apologize for your boundaries, in the way you show up for yourself even when no one else sees it. It lives in your breath, in your body, in your presence, and it was never outside of you. It was always here, waiting to be remembered. There's a certain kind of peace that arrives not when everything around you is calm, but when you finally realize you no longer have to respond to everything. Not every comment, not every doubt, not every emotion. You start to feel the power of restraint, not as suppression, but as sovereignty. The choice to hold your center when everything is pulling at you. The ability to hear noise and still not lose your rhythm. That is not detachment. That is discipline. That is the grace of emotional maturity unfolding within you. And emotional maturity doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you feel without falling apart. It means you allow emotion to pass through, but you don't build your home in it. You don't let it define you. You let it inform you. You listen to the message. You bow in acknowledgement. Then you let it move. Because that's what emotion was always meant to do. Move. But you've lived for so long thinking you had to fix your feelings. That sadness was a problem. That anger was shameful. That fear made you weak. And now you know better. Now you know that each feeling is an invitation to see more clearly, to love more deeply, to become more whole, not by fixing, but by accepting. And as you accept, your life begins to shift, not on the outside, but on the inside. You start waking up differently. You breathe before reaching for your phone. You stretch your body not to perform, but to feel. You make time for stillness, not because it's a rule, but because your soul begins to crave it. You drink water slowly. You prepare meals with presence. You begin to understand that the sacred doesn't arrive with bells and whistles. It's already here, in the smallest of things, waiting to be noticed. And that noticing becomes your new practice. You become someone who notices the softness in someone's voice, the feeling in your chest when you walk past a certain place, the way the light changes in late afternoon. You start to feel alive in the kind of way that can't be measured, because it's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's real, it's quiet, it's steady. You begin to trust that steadiness. You used to crave intensity, the big changes, the high emotions, the rush. But now you find peace in simplicity. You learn to love the slow morning, the unhurried walk, the silence in a conversation. You no longer need your life to be loud to be meaningful. And that shift brings with it something else. Contentment, not complacency, but a deep, grounded sense that you are exactly where you need to be, even if you're still growing, even if things aren't perfect, even if you don't have all the answers. You begin to release the pressure to always be becoming and start celebrating who you are right now, with all the mess, all the softness, all the strength. You stop needing to explain your healing. You stop asking for permission to change. You let go of the need to make your growth palatable to others. You realize that not everyone will understand your evolution, and that's okay, because your path is yours, and no one else has to walk it to validate it. And as you walk it, you begin to feel lighter. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop carrying what isn't yours. The expectations, the projections, the guilt. You set it down, one weight at a time, and with every release, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You reclaim your voice, not the one shaped by others, but the one that rises from within. The one that speaks with clarity, even when it trembles. The one that says no with love and yes with alignment. You begin to speak your truth not to provoke, but to free yourself. You reclaim your energy, not by walling yourself off, but by being intentional with your presence. You no longer pour into what drains you. You stop proving your worth through self-abandonment. You give to others from fullness, not obligation. And when you are empty, you rest without shame. You reclaim your joy, not the performative kind, but the real kind. The kind that sneaks up on you in moments of presence. The kind that doesn't need to be documented or shared. The kind that exists simply because you are awake to the beauty around you. And through all of this, you reclaim your peace, not as an escape, but as a homecoming, a returning to the essence of who you've always been, beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the wounds. That peace does not mean your life is free from pain. It means pain no longer dictates your life. It means you move with grace through grief. You breathe through discomfort. You hold yourself gently when the world feels heavy. It means you walk with presence, with intention, with heart. The kind that hums through your body and reminds every cell that you are safe now. That you don't have to fight your way through life anymore. That you don't need to armor your heart just to get through the day. You stop believing the old myths, the ones that said if you let your guard down, you'll fall apart. That if you feel too much, you'll be overwhelmed. That if you stop striving, you'll disappear. Instead, you learn that your softness doesn't make you small. It makes you whole. It allows you to take up space, not with force, but with truth. It teaches you that presence is power. And through this lens, you begin to see everything differently. You notice beauty in the cracks. You feel wonder in the mundane. You no longer need your life to be extraordinary to feel gratitude. A moment of quiet becomes a miracle. A kind word from a stranger becomes enough. A deep breath, taken consciously, becomes sacred. You stop waiting for the big signs. You stop holding out for the perfect moment. You begin to realize that the most meaningful changes often happen in the quiet corners of life, in the pauses between conversations, in the way your shoulders finally drop, in the way your chest expands after years of being closed. You see how much has shifted, not because someone else pointed it out, but because you feel it in your bones. You feel the steadiness where anxiety used to sit. You feel the openness where shame once lived. You feel the clarity that comes not from having all the answers, but from asking gentler questions. You learn to live inside your body again. You stop treating it like a burden to be managed or a project to be improved. You start listening to the tension, the fatigue, the aches and pulses that carry messages you've ignored for too long. You ask your body, what do you need? And then you actually wait for the answer. Sometimes the answer is rest, sometimes it's movement, sometimes it's silence, or food, or tears, or sunlight. Whatever it is, you stop arguing with it. You stop overriding it. You stop living from your head and start listening with your whole being. That listening becomes your medicine, your ritual, your peace. And as your relationship with yourself deepens, so too does your relationship with the world. You become more compassionate, not because you're trying to be, but because you understand pain more intimately. You don't rush to judge. You don't need to be right. You understand that everyone is walking through something invisible. You've stopped demanding perfection from others because you stopped demanding it from yourself. You meet people where they are, not to fix them, but to witness them. You offer presence, not solutions. You give space, not advice. And your presence alone becomes healing because it carries the energy of someone who has learned to hold space for their own storm. Someone who no longer fears emotion. Someone who can stand still in the middle of uncertainty and still feel grounded. This is emotional maturity, not the absence of emotion, but the capacity to hold it all without losing yourself. It's the willingness to be seen in your full humanity. It's the courage to say, I feel deeply and I'm still okay. And that courage radiates. It changes how you show up in every space. It changes how you love. It changes how you live. You no longer seek to impress. You seek to connect. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't need to prove your worth. You are enough simply by being. You begin to realize that peace is not something you attain. It's something you choose, over and over, in every moment where you could react, but instead decide to breathe. In every moment where you could fight, but instead choose to understand. In every moment where you could abandon yourself, but instead stay close, stay kind, stay rooted. This is the practice now, not perfection, not performance, but presence. There's a quiet revolution that happens when you realize you don't have to wait for your life to be different in order to feel peace. You don't have to wait for the noise to stop, or for the answers to come, or for the pain to be gone. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It's the presence of you, fully here, fully honest, fully alive in this moment. You begin to see that peace is a way of being, not a place you arrive at after the storm has passed, but a steady current you can tap into, even in the middle of it. You find it in the breath that comes after a heavy cry. You find it in the stillness that lingers after choosing not to react. You find it in the moment you place your hand on your heart and say, I'm here. I'm listening. That presence, that pause, it's not nothing, it's everything. It's the doorway. And once you've stepped through it, even once, you'll never forget the way back again. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop seeking permission to be who you are. You start to trust that the version of you who feels deeply, who moves slowly,